Hello, everybody, or whoever happens to see this. I am recording this because Luke Thompson. This video is primarily for Luke Thompson. Shout out Luke Thompson.
You need context. Context.
He just made a video, uh, largely in response to my conversation with particularly Chris, Sir Waves of Obsession.
You won't even want to talk to that person anymore because they'll be so non-personal because they've outsourced so much of their cognition to.
And um I'm not being allowed to send my comment reply. I am sending, I wrote a long comment, and every time I try and send it, it gets deleted, and I broke it up into multiple parts, and it still didn't work. So I'm just going to record this. Um, yeah, I figured maybe we'll just go through it, and I was gonna add my comments primarily for Luke. Um, all right.
All right, here we go. I'm recording. It's been a long time. Hopefully this is working since I just did a video on my own, and I'm not sure how to like pop up videos and do my branding type stuff, but I did figure out how to get this Cormac clip set up, and I'm gonna play it, and then I'm gonna go on to what I want to say, and we're gonna move on with a short video.
We had this conversation, or pieces of when I'm talking to you. I don't know what I'm going to say next. I know what the subject is. I have a vague sense, but I'm going to say something, and it will be in a coherent sentence that I will say, and you will understand. But it's not like some part of my brain is making up sentences and then whispering to me, and then I repeat them. That doesn't make any sense. And it's not like the next sentence I'm going to say to you, it's an idea, but it's not a sentence. And yet, almost immediately, I will form it into a sentence.
Exactly.
It's like when you try and explain something to somebody, and you say, let me think about that. How can I put this? Okay, put what? What's the this that you're trying to put?
Right. Comment number one. Right. This is annoying that I have to do this, but perhaps it'll be good, you know? So, okay, first one, I think that thing that what is it that we're trying to put into words? I think it's ultimately an unenglishable, cannot be put into English, experiencing. It's like a lived reality, an idea, or a spiritual being, or something like that. This is kind of the most diffuse, vague of my, because it's obviously a huge question, but uh expound upon this. I will expound upon this further as we continue. Onward.
You're trying to put it in words, but you don't have them yet.
Yeah.
But the idea is there, but it's not.
Okay, yes, I had a okay. This is so tedious. Uh um the second
What's the this that you're trying to put?
one might also rephrase the question. How might I best eurythmize this musical experience that is tickling my noose? You know, it's people say, how can I put this into words? I think we could also say, how might I best eurythmize
Our larynx eurythmizes.
this musical experience that's happening in my subtle being or something of the sort. Right, onward.
The idea is there, but it's not. The idea exists independently of language.
Okay, so I don't quite get the whole thing, but he says the idea exists independently of language.
Right. That's the next comment. This, of course, it depends what we mean by language. You know, like some people, like Chris Langan, for example, would say that everything is linguistic. Even like he would say, like you have a terminal and a non-terminal domain, and even there you would kind of have like non-terminal code in a sense, and like everything is kind of linguistic syntactic operators, etc. The logos at the ground of being, the word of God, etc. So I don't know if you can have something independent of language, but of course it depends what we mean. Maybe it's like in a pre-propositional sense. Onward.
What made me think of this, and I wanted to do a little video. Also, I'm going to be having I'm very excited about this. I'm going to be having a live stream with Jordan Daniel Wood and Nate. I'm pretty sure Nate's going to be there
Excited to watch.
for at least part of it. And
Exciting.
on people airing their grievances with their beefs against and their fears and concerns and doubts regarding Christian universalism and universal reconciliation and apokatastasis, and however you want to frame those things. The idea that God not only desires to save all, but he is able to, and he will accomplish it, that all will be saved. And what is salvation, right? Union with God, connection to he who gives life, connection to he who even transcends death.
Right. A quick comment about universalism. Oh shit. Or perhaps Sir Luke Thompson. Or perhaps what is salvation? Perhaps it's remembering those inherent connections. Remembering that we are one with God. And this is kind of the dreaming God idea, like the Abraxas idea is a way that I tend to think about it.
I have imagined Abraxas as the spirit of humanity, a sleeping god entombed in his own dream, who lives a slave to his illusions, who could work miracles if only he dared to awaken. When he is asleep, he summons the devil, but when he awakens, he is Christ. My poem, Reflection in the Grail, was conceived as an invocation to awaken this sleeping god.
However, it's also I believe it's the word Leela in Hinduism. It's that God loses himself.
So God is essentially seeing what it's like not to understand everything, to be a computationally bounded observer participant. God is confusing himself, like I said, to understand himself in a richer and deeper way. So it's an expression of Leela in Hinduism. It's the creative play of the divine absolute. This is the fundamental fact of our reality. This is the perspective you need to actually make sense of the rules of the universe, or why there is a universe at all.
And that we are not fundamentally separate from God, but to be united with God is to remember your union with God, that you already exist within, and that you already you're already one with God, basically. And this illusion is kind of you might say it's Maya or something of the sort. And this is the redeeming of Gnosticism, which is that we're not trying to escape, but we're trying to escape our bullshit mental narratives that tell us that basically it's like sin as well. Sin is missing the mark. So to be saved is to not sin in a sense, which is to remember body, member, to incarnate the reality of your true being, which is a spark of the divine, like in the Kabbalistic sense of
Tzimtzum. It means in Hebrew God's contraction, withdrawal, retreat. It sometimes points to a voluntary action in which God retreats into his circumference in order to make a room within himself for something else. He first creates nothingness in order to make an empty room, a space that is marked by radical separation between it and the God, and only into this emptiness sends the rays of emanation, which then form the bud of the future world. the story is actually even more dramatic, but what happens in the end of this whole dramatic theosophic story is that the world emerges as something radically other to God, radically other, sharing only elements of the dispersed light, but absolutely discontinuous with the divine origin. And this is when Hans Jonas comes in the picture. He says that the Godhead, he doesn't even call it a God in a personal sense, has given itself over to hazard and risk, the process of becoming. The first withdrawal of God that created this space of a new kind of being called becoming. It also orients us towards the possible metaphysical future of the world. This is drawing on Luria's mystical or messianic idea that the world is created as radically other to God's mode of being, but it also is charged with an obligation to put itself in order.
You know, the fracturing of the vessels are such types of things where
our job is to identify across the world where the divine light is and raise up these sparks and sort of that we could rebuild this vessel.
Yeah, we are of the same as God or something of the sort, and we must remember that and wake up to who we really, really, really are.
That is to recreate the divine face, but then within the immanence.
All right. Onward.
So, all right, this is imagination. So the comment, sorry, Jonathan Demir, I'll put this in the description. I haven't been sleeping on your channel, but I haven't added it to my hierarchy of must-watch stuff because there's too much corner content.
No worries. No worries. And you're not alone. Many people have not regarded me in this fashion. And that's right. And there's a lot of content. Onward.
So I've been watching Stephen D20 lately. I've been watching Demir. And at this one, I hadn't finished this yet, but I was watching his video with Chris from Waves of Obsession, Chris McDonald. And they said, they talked about imagination and imagination getting weak through lack of use or exercise. And oh man, that's exactly good.
Comment number. I don't remember which number. I think of this is kind of a inflammatory, perhaps, or a I don't know what's called, but I want to say here, I think about exercise as a luciferic thing in general. And I would rather kind of leave that ambiguous and vague, such that people will think about it or something. Like exercise, it's kind of rebelling against the mechanical aspects of it's like a willful striving, and there's interesting connections with exorcism as well. It's like exorcism, but yes, exercise as exercising particularly the imagination as a luciferic thing. Onward. That's the wrong desktop. Boom.
And oh man, they talked about imagination and imagination getting weak through lack of use or exercise. And oh man, it's exactly good. It makes me think of these the materialist kind of atheist emergence only types, physicalists who don't have an acknowledgement of. Now Stephen D20 would nuance this differently. He would say you could have an emergence kind of thing, but not without some kind of idealistic consciousness that isn't merely emerging in a mechanistic way from the physical stuff. My daughter's patiently
This is so
waiting.
tedious. This is so tedious that I'm doing this in this way. All right. What is the next comment? Reading. Emergence and reductionism is Ahrimanic, or Yaldabaoth, depending on how we look at it. I would say kind of it's Ahrimanic, such that Ahriman says there is no God. It's all emergence, reductionism, and Lucifer says rebel from God and be higher than God, as if you could. And this is at their worst. This is what they would say at their kind of worst expressions of the two. All right. Onward.
My daughter's patiently waiting for me to be done with this. I'll be succinct, be brief. So that Cormac clip, when he's saying, okay, let me think about that. When you're sitting there doing that, when you're having a communication with someone and you're thinking like, okay, how to say it, what is going on there?
I humbly suggest that there we are vibing. That is when you are vibing.
Vibing is a thing, and it's a way, it's a mode of relating.
Or put more fancily, empathic resonance. That's when you're empathically resonating.
The imaginal perception of the or phenomena, which we see exemplified by Johann von Goethe, is itself a kind of sympathetic, or rather empathic resonance. Through this imaginal faculty, our own inner noetic worlds come to tune into the formative, noetic beings which generate and guide the becoming of the world which lies beyond us.
There's kind of a joke here because the timestamp there was 4:20, but I'm doing this video, so it doesn't quite fit as well. But anyway, it's to say also, I think drugs, so-called drugs, at least for me, they help me with this. Like weed helps me to vibe better. I was just talking, have kind of an ongoing, Luke Johnston and I have been talking about this, thinking about maybe doing a convo, and it's such an interesting topic, like pharmacon and correct pharmacon, and because I also think pharmacon is luciferic, and we can see that in this image right here from the Abraxian cosmogram. This is Lucifer, and you can see the caduceus medicine, and this is just pretty self-evident to me, such that Lucifer, part of the redemption of Lucifer is finding a right relationship with pharmacon, and because I cannot deny that weed, cannabis, has helped me in this regard. I really liked how Luke phrased it. There's so much that could be said here. I think maybe I'll just wax a little bit about it. This idea about Luke was asking me if maybe there's connection with the way that Stephen in our conversation we had talked about this distinction with higher and lower dimensions in terms of perhaps like the etheric and the astral being of a lower dimensional sense, in the sense that they're more I think the key is to think about they would be more core or more to the essence of the thing. I think the higher and lower thing, it can maybe be confusing a bit, whereas like we can think that plants, according to Steiner, plants also, and many other people, plants also have etheric bodies. When you get to animals, you have the astral body, which is like emotionality and drives and passions and such, and personality. But with the etheric, thinking about maybe yeah, like maybe cannabis puts you in touch with the etheric through this kind of interaction with the etheric soul of the plant or something like that, like kind of like nature spirits in a way. And because ultimately in the ether we are interconnected with the beings around us, and ultimately the etheric earth, like we're all part of the etheric body of the earth, and maybe when we slow down, we return to that kind of more primary, in the sense where it's a lower dimensional and like a primary sense where we emerge out of the etheric life of the earth. Emergence and reductionism is Ahrimanic or something like that. And also like slowing down to become more present. Like for me, I can definitely say that when I first tried cannabis, it was very helpful for me in this regard, to be able to vibe with reality and others and my what it is that I'm trying to say and such. Because what are we doing when we say, how do I put it, how do I eurythmize? We are empathically resonating with that which we wish to communicate.
I believe the human being is like a kind of an antenna. It's something that receives, that resonates with everything around us, that vibrates together with the world around us, and that has the choice to emit a signal itself. It can receive the resonance and send it out again, and that's still a materialist view on the human being. It's still a materialist view, but it's a subtle materialist view.
In a sense, we're vibing. Excuse me, just getting over COVID here. Back. All right, onward. Oh, so tedious.
You're playing in the realm of the imagination, but
oh, it reminded me of tripping.
You're playing in the realm of the imagination, but it's not sentences, it's not propositions, it's not in words. There is something that you see.
It reminded me of tripping, because that's really, of course, so much could be said here, but playing in the realm of the imagination, and Pharmakon being Lucifer, and okay, we're gonna get there. We're going on. In my comments, I phrased it as a joke. Oh, you mean tripping? Playing in the realm of the imagination. Anyway.
When you're sitting there doing that, when you're having a communication with someone, and you're thinking like, okay, how to say it? What is going on there? You're playing in the realm of the imagination, but it's not sentences, it's not propositions, it's not in words. There is something that you see, and that's something that Chris and Jonathan spoke about in that conversation. They talked about words as being signs or pointers. I think they're more than that. I think words properly, words as they are meant to be, and true speech does more than merely point at something. It resonates with something. It's a symbol. It's connected to something. It's tethered to it. It connects to the essence of the thing to which you're pointing. It's not a mere sign. It's a symbol.
Yes. This is this is like okay, this is probably the most important one that I was most keen to comment regarding. Yes, true speech as iconography, essentially, is basically what I'm raving about. It fits with transfiguration, in my opinion, and spirited breath. When we are truly speaking, we do not just kind of allude to things. We directly, this is what Plato said about techne as well, and language. Plato said that language, it's not just about getting information across. It's about embodying truths, like realities, like it's to take your lived experience and to eurythmize it, essentially, to put it into to incarnate it in a linguistic sense.
On the theme of instrumentalization, in regards especially to language, sophistry, the effacement of language, especially with AI, these large language models, and commodity and things like that.
Sure, yeah. There's a principle that I think that needs to be held on to, regardless of the context, and that is, what exactly is a word? What is language? Plato is is the one I follow on this. For Plato, the purpose of language is to make being apparent. The purpose of a word is to manifest reality. Now, it's also, as a secondary function, it is to communicate to another person and possibly to persuade. But that, if you make that first, it changes the nature of communication. If you don't root things like communication into this more basic reality of making being manifest, you run into all sorts of problems. And I think that's the heart of his criticism of sophistry, is that language ceased to be this intrinsic participation in reality that amplifies it in the way that poetry does, for instance. And instead, language is taken to be a pure tool, a pure instrument of persuasion, that you can learn sort of techniques and so forth, that ways to produce effects in an effective manner. And that pattern there, the difference between a kind of techne that is rooted in reality on the one hand, and a technology, what I would call technology, that is abstracted from reality, and it's a pure technique, rationalized technique for the sake of producing effects. That kind of pattern you can see in all sorts of areas. Design would be one. Installing Windows is another. You have a program that tells you where to put the windows. That's very different from somebody on site looking at it, responding to the particularities, and then making a decision. In one case, you've got reality itself participating in the activity, and in the other case, you've got something that's being determined totally in abstraction and then imposed. And I think the cultural implications, this is put fairly abstractly. If we had more time, we could work out details. But I think the cultural implications of the difference between those two things are infinite.
That's beautifully said.
And this, insofar as transfiguration, it fits with this idea, like, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, said Jesus Christ. And such that when he was transfigured, it's the glory of God directly, which is being revealed through his garments even, which we will come back to. And it's so numinous to me, but I must persist here. So true speech, because that's the thing. Yes, I'm totally with you, Luke, that I wouldn't have used the word sign. Steiner uses the word sign in that sign in that one Stein in that one clip.
We must realize that in speaking, we are merely gesturing towards something. Words are gestures, pointers, or signs, and that is also what eurythmy teaches us.
Where he says that all words are merely gestures, which is, they are gestures, but he said that they're gesturing towards something. But I think it, perhaps even that's like a translation type of thing. We have to remember that Steiner was speaking in German.
We must realize that as our body becomes the vehicle of speech, it forces the truth downward, and as a result, part of it dies on our lips. We can make it come to life again in Christ when we understand that we must spiritualize it. That is, mentally in our thinking we must include the Spirit rather than taking in only the words as such. This is what we must learn, my dear friends.
It was probably from a lecture as well, where he's kind of speaking off the cuff, but not to say that we should, not to say that really takes away from it, speaking off the cuff and such, but true speech. And yes, this idea that language is iconic, but I really like the visual sense, like iconographic in the sense that it literally, like, it's like an icon, because that fits with eye contact. And it's not just the language, the the linguistic connections I'm trying to forge here, but in the sense that I really think there's something about that which is significant. Iconography. But yes, and this also gets into textualism, like being obsessed with text and handwriting, and it gets real nuanced and tricky, like because it's interesting that when you read something, apparently the muscles in your throat or in your larynx actually perform the gestures as if you were speaking them, but they're just like so subtle that they don't actually produce like they don't become vocalized. Like they're just kind of very subconscious gestures that you're doing. So there is some kind of like reinstantiation of the of that which is symbolized by the language or something, but it's not man, I'm gonna lose my train of thought 'cause people get so picky about this stuff. It's like it's also that uh handwriting, it's like when you get uniform text and stuff, like so much of the meaning, like textuality, man, I'm not gonna do a whole rant about textuality here, but it's really an issue in my opinion. People thinking they know what other people mean and jumping to conclusions about who people are and such when we read into the gaps that are created by uniform print and such. It's unfortunate. But yeah, anyway, I'll save the, I've done plenty of ranting about textuality elsewhere, but yes, true speech as iconography, not just signs pointing. Yes, I think that's super important. Okay, onward. We're like halfway done. All right.
It connects to the essence of the thing to which you're pointing. It's not a mere sign, it's a symbol. And these things have multiple meanings. They're just not one-to-one conveyances. And so when you're playing in the imagination, you have to play in the imagination to be able to see what you don't see, to see that thing that you cannot name, that you don't have words for.
And what other people don't have words for, such that most people, I would say, and perhaps I'm exaggerating because it pisses me off, that a lot of people don't know what they mean, it's like the pre-propositional meaning that we all always embody. Like you could say that I mean something by my gesture right now that I might not even be aware of. And you can help people in this regard. Okay, it's to see what other people don't have words for, what they pre-propositionally mean. Many people don't know what they mean to say. Like I would say ultimately deep down, what everybody means to say is kind of what the angels are saying / singing in the heavenly chorus. It's like ultimately we're all meaning to say transfiguration, like Christ was speaking God into being in the transfiguration in a sense. But often that's very like deep down hidden, and can be difficult to connect with people on that level, because we're not really at that level because it's all covered up with layers of shit and masks and sin and such. Like somebody might be clearly traumatized, but like and like suffering, and that's what their non-propositional meaning is conveying in like the tone of their words and their gesture and stuff. But at a propositional level, they don't see that. Like they're just living in this propositional, I would call it a hellscape of sorts, and disconnected from the body. But if you attend to the body, you can see and attend to the body. What is that? It's the four bodies, which are ultimately one body, because you can watch their physical body, and you can see the etheric body, which would be more about like living. It's like the life force type of thing in terms of it almost corresponds with like health, like physical health, like how alive they are. And I'm gonna butcher it if I try and every time I try and I don't understand this at a propositional level yet. The like there's so much going on here because it's also gets into temporality, how they are connected with the beings around them and stuff. But then you can see the astral, and you're watching movements, like you can see the movements of the body and engage with the person at this deeper level where you help them, where you can see what they mean, even if they have difficulty putting into words. And you know, the astral body would be more like what drives, or planets are like most predominant in their current being. Like you can see if somebody's kind of acting out a Neptunian fantasy, be like, to identify these things allows us to connect with each other at a deeper level, in my opinion. And then I would say you can even see the person's soul, like the eye connects with the idea of eye contact. I think that the white stone name shines through the eyes always, or something like that. And yes. Okay. All right. I think further elaborations to come. Onward. Onward.
And to be able to see what you don't see.
Yes, you have to exercise the imagination so that you can do that.
To see that thing that you cannot name, that you don't have words for. And if you don't, this is the main point of what I want to make with this, is if you don't prioritize time where you use your imagination and you exercise your imagination, the same as muscles, you'll lose it. You'll become a mere vessel for the possession of other imaginations.
I think that's a great point. And I think, what this reminds me of is the word skole, which is where we get the word school. And skole is about like not quite purposeless abiding, but there's a clip about it on my channel.
What is the mode of, let's say, comportment towards the world, so we can let beings just appear as they are in their substance, and that is precisely skole. The temptation is, so to say, that we fall back into a mode of, let's say, enframing. So to say, we force beings to, let's say, conform to our will, instead of letting them be just as they are. Which is, right, Heidegger recognizes, right, where we can, so to say, we can withstand and bear and suffer the kind of like this overpowering surge of beings, nature. And these are all the things that we humans can do, all the practices. Music, art, sports, meditation, contemplation. Dialectic, or dialogos. The dialogue, right? Poetry. All those things help us, right, to have, let's say, this or cultivate this scholeic attitude towards the world. And precisely by that, we let the world as it is. We're just, let's say, participating in the sheer worlding of the world, as Heidegger said.
Ian McGilchrist recently talked about it in his Wisdom, in his talk with Stephen Blackwood about, I think that's his name, about
What advice or observations can you share how to pay attention in a thoughtful way over the course of your beautiful lectures, how to develop the habits of being a rich and real and deep thinking person?
Well, as you know, the root of the word scholar is scholar, meaning leisure in Greek. And one needs unpressured time, not useless time, very useful time, but time that is useful in proportion that one is not forced to close it down into an activity, but to allow things to develop in their own time. Because we can't make certain things happen. We can make a mug, but we can't make great ideas, great works of art overnight. They come out of a good deal of time. But that time is not wasted. And we think that if we can somehow utilize it and show that it has been made useful, we have validated it. As a result, I think that far too many people are encouraged to close down their reflections prematurely to something that they can publish. And I know that if I had done this earlier in my career, when I did have quite a bit of freedom, I would not have been able to pursue the lines of thought that I have done, because I would have prematurely crystallized my thinking in too narrow a way. I think so leisure is important, and I think doing is, of course, part of life, but it is an ancient truth of the East that not knowing and not doing are also valuable. And that's not idleness and ignorance. They are, as I sometimes put it, an unknowing that comes after knowing, not the ignorance that comes before knowing, and an undoing that comes after doing, not the idleness that comes before doing. They are ways of refraining which have in themselves great wisdom.
About, I think that's his name, about education and how this is what the schools are really supposed to do. To a large extent, they're supposed to create this space where one can develop their imaginative faculties. And our modern, we don't have schole in our modern times. It's always this rush to do the next thing, but it's also like meditation and prayer, particularly like I think about prayer as really, it kind of reminded me of the way that Peterson used to talk about prayer as like imagining possible futures, like connecting to the Jungian self in a sense, which is like the future possibilities of who you might be. And you're like it's kind of like the law of attraction as well, like thinking about the things that people often do it in this like God, please give me this. But it's like, if you're, another way we could see prayer is like thinking about the possibilities that might be, and like being kind of calling them into being in a sense, and that requires imagination, like in the so yeah, I think setting time aside to be freely imaginative. And it's not like I'm gonna, just, I really like this word skole, I encourage you to look it up. All right, onward.
A mere vessel for use your imagination, and you exercise your imagination the same as muscles, you'll lose it. You'll become a mere vessel for the possession of other imaginations. And that's what ideological possession is, or arguably like the worst forms of confessionalism, or the non-player characters that are just out there acting in the world like zombies walking around that are possessed by other spirits. Spirits like consumerism, whether that's entertainment, whether that's food, whether that's money, whether that's sex, whether that's anything.
Yes. I think about this. This reminds me of the Brexian cosmogram again, and Steiner's triad, such that I think the imagination is inherently luciferic. It's this upward striving. And when there's no Lucifer, when there's no imagination, you end up getting dogmatism and blind NPCs. But we also need that side in a way too. which comes up here. All right.
You'll be possessed by a spirit that will use your body to enact its desires in the world rather than your own desires. And you have to touch into your own imagination to even know, what is it? To know what you think about something, to know who you are. You have to cultivate enough quiet and maybe a lack of consumption.
This is where I actually think we see the redeeming qualities of that, of the left-hand side of things, such that the Marian virginal receptivity is also how we come to know our true desires and who we truly are. And ultimately, all desires kind of point to a desire for union with or remembrance of God and furtherance of his kind of will. So like it's the Whitestone name thing again. It's like yes, I do want I don't want to be possessed by other people's desires. And I don't just want my own personal Luciferic desires, but the Whitestone name is like it is kind of with this idea of what I truly desire, which is ultimately perhaps beyond me, and to be Marian and virginal is to be receptive, and kind of like a blind NPC in a way, to like receive your true purpose. I wouldn't know if I would use the word NPC in that context, but hopefully that makes sense. Oh gosh, this is kind of difficult. All right, here we go. Onward.
And you have to touch into your own imagination to even know, what is it? To know what you think about something, to know who you are. You have to cultivate enough quiet and maybe a lack of consumption of either.
But I think that is kind of what Sherry talks about with the space of no images, in a sense, is that it has to be to know who you truly are. That's not kind of an imaginal thing. It's more of a quietude. It's hard to describe, but onward.
Even quality content, let's say that. This is Grimm's whole things about waging war against mind control. Because mind control, what is that? It's a foreign entity and their imagination taking control of your mind and using your body as a meat vehicle to accomplish its own ends, to promote and enact, because spirits don't have physical bodies, so they use your physical body to enact their desires in the world.
Yes. In my opinion, yes. And this reminds me of a clip on my channel called Etheric Beings and Independence, where Steiner talks about how you have to be able to feel yourself as separate in order to properly participate in a larger body or something like that. And he said that this is kind of the purpose of the Christ event. And it also fits with Barfield on original participation, final participation, such that before the Christ event, we were kind of in this groupthink hive mind mode. And then we could have separateness, which is kind of epitomized in the crucifixion, separateness, perhaps even from God in a sense. Very tricky to talk about, of course, but this idea of individual beings, such that I'm a separate person, I'm a individual, and then in developing that firmly, in a sense, that is what allows me to then become basically a cell in the larger body the body of Christ, and how that's not a hive mind, that's not blindly submitting to a larger entity. That is each of us in our fullness contributing to a larger thing, doing what we are most called to do as a unique individual. The blood cells are the blood cells, the muscle cells are the muscle cells, and so on, such that by abiding truly in your Whitestone name, I would say, or something like that, then that is what, then you can not be taken over by mind control. And these kind of personalized things are also distributed in a sense. It's like, this reminds me of birth charts as well, like astrological birth charts, such that we each have a personalized kind of purpose in a sense. And I would say the other thing with regard to mind control is also becoming aware of this technology, which I rave about. I frame it kind of as technology because okay.
Kind of techne that is rooted in reality.
If we go to when he said okay, I'm gonna go back here. Thanks for sticking with me. I hear y'all.
Because what mind control, what is that? It's a foreign entity and their imagination taking control of your mind and using your body as a meat vehicle to accomplish its own ends.
Right. So that kind of course, rings a bit of possession by the Holy Spirit. It also makes me think of the music of heaven, how we want to be icons of the purposive circle dance of the spiritual beings, in a sense.
One of the principles of Trinitarian theology that describes the interrelations of the Trinity is perichoresis, which literally means circle dance.
Wow. Such that becoming aware, so this, and it's also kind of like humans as Aeolian harps, like the music flows through and we want to sound that music out through our eurythmy. And it's basically the eurythmic astromusical language or something of the sort. And this technology of our ability to eurythmize, I think about this technology as like equivalent with like the atom bomb or something of the sort, where it's like it can be that's not a great example because it's hard to see good uses for atom bombs. But like let's say nuclear stuff in general, such that like this language, we're typically enchanted by it / bewitched by it if we're on the blindness, harmonic, Yaldabaothian side. We are blind to it, and we are controlled by the mind control of others. And we don't realize that we're being fucked with. Or we end up being used by the technology, where we find ourselves eurythmizing in mind control-ish ways to the people around us, manipulating people, maybe even beyond our in our subconscious language. Like, I'm probably doing it right now to some extent. I tend to be more Luciferic than harmonic, if you haven't noticed. It's all about the balance. And but to be used by I think about it kind of like the mask, where you can put on particular faces, but then if you're doing that all the time, then the technology, you get stuck behind the mask, and it's like it's to be identified with your persona and to be controlled by it in a sense. And rather than using it artfully in kind of a redeemed Lucifer way, which would be like to be aware of this. And this is essential, in my opinion, for not being in the grips of mind control. this is really becoming an elaborate thing, but hopefully we're on track here. That you have to be able to notice that when somebody's hitting you with this, your rhythm, this tone in their voice and the rhythm of their speech and like the gestures, and it's like you have to be able to see that they're using that the technology, that the magic of this linguistic faculty is happening, and to be able to see through that, to not get caught up in the in the advertisements, catchy jingles, or ba da ba ba ba, I'm loving it. Are you really loving it? When they say you're loving it, you're inclined to feel, but if you're like, no, this is language that's happening and I see through it. And that's very important in my opinion, because there's lots of mind control going on from everyone. And okay. So yes, etheric beings and independence, and becoming aware of the eurythmy as a thing that's going on, in order to be a cell in the larger body, true purpose. All right, onward. Lots of thoughts about this. I really appreciate, I really liked, it was cool to see. Thanks for engaging with my conversation with, the conversation that I had with Chris. This is cool. Let's continue onward.
Because what mind control, what is that? It's a foreign entity and their imagination taking control of your mind and using your body as a meat vehicle to accomplish its own ends, to promote and enact, because spirits don't have physical bodies, so they use your physical body to enact their desires in the world. So, but you have your own imagination. What do you want? What are you trying to see? What are you focusing on? What are you meditating on? What are you contemplating on? And you have to exercise that imagination, or else it will atrophy to the point of, I don't know, almost annihilation.
Okay. Yes. And just another thing is that it's did I get to the yes. It's also okay, yeah. I talked about this a little bit earlier. It's like to imaginally pierce the images that you see, the visual, because you could see the etheric and the astral if you know how to do that, if you become attuned to those things, if you're
This imaginal resonance, in other words, contains the power by which we are able to transcend the boundaries which seemingly divide the inner from the outer, the path by which we must escape the Kantian, subjectivistic labyrinth is one of empathy. As empathy is not merely an emotional affect, but rather an epistemological faculty of truly cosmological significance. This empathic resonance is the means by which we come to see the interiority of the sensory world, and it is the means by which we come to see into the inner fathoms of other human beings.
The eye is always there in the eyeball, in my opinion. The eyeballs. And it's to resonate with the persons, empathically. This empathic resonance comes through imagination. You have to imaginally pierce the images to get to what is deeper, the more essential aspects of the person. Okay, now we get to the final stretch here. Kind of a little bit of a switch up, talking about
annihilation. And then if your imagination becomes annihilated, who are you? What exists? You have ceased to be, and you really are a zombie. You really are a non-player character you have ceased to be, and you really are a zombie. You really are a non-player character that's just being a body for other imaginations.
All right. Annihilationism, perhaps. I know I don't know if I'd say quite annihilationism, but it's interesting of course, Sir Luke here is always talking about universalism, and I tend to feel what he's saying about it.
If your brother is in hell, you are also in hell, right?
Basically, the relational nature of personhood to the point where like what you are cannot be separated from who you loved, because the content of your being is precisely that. So
it's interesting, kind of thinking about, you know, when the imagination is gone, and you become an NPC and you don't actually exist anymore. Is that annihilationism? Like, is that being eaten by Ahriman? Is that being eaten by the left side, which goes down to the void and death and what else did I say here? Yeah, it's like, you know, when you have no imagination, you become a mechanism. You become Ahrimanized, and but perhaps, you know, it's also like death and renewal type of thing. Like, it's also the Grail, which is this kenotic self-emptying and changing, and how ideally the spirit that would replace you, if you don't exist and you just get replaced by someone else. I'm trying to think about the good expression of that other side, which would be, you know, perhaps this is how we die to become new versions of ourselves. You know, that but this is getting very nuanced and tricky. But yeah, generally it seems right that we do not want to completely abandon the imagination in this sense that he's talking about it, where yeah, envisioning of possible futures and such, piercing into deeper realities, understanding things as iconic. Yeah, probably not annihilationism, just to be clear. But it's interesting, you know, to hear Luke say, you don't exist anymore. You know, that rubs up against annihilationism, kind of, right? And that's what I'm reminded of one of Galahad Adonis's videos where his first one, Contact 2020, it says the angel spoke, he wants to eat you all, speaking about kind of the enemy here, whether that be the artifacts or death or something of the sort. I tend to think that death will be redeemed by a reframing or something. Like you know, perhaps to be eliminated is to become fully mechanized, to be plugged into the machine, to merge with the AI, where we then have none of our own imaginings. We just exist within these automatic processes, and definitely no good, in my opinion. But it's interesting to think about. Yes, so that is all. Let me finish the video here.
So exercise your imagination. That's my encouragement. Hi, kitty cat.
Yeah, so in conclusion, he said kind of jokingly, you know, because we never want to pin this stuff down. I think key here is really this idea of Lucifer being redeemed, or Lucifer perhaps has been redeemed. Like Steiner said that at the crucifixion, you had the two criminals being crucified on either side, and one was Lucifer and one was Ahriman. And Christ said to Lucifer, "Today you will be with me in heaven." This is the redemption of Lucifer, such that we can have a right relationship with the Luciferic as such. This imaginative imagination. You know, I think about imagination as Luciferic, as I said. Um, whereas Armon cursed Christ, and it's still in the process of being redeemed or something of the sort, and that would have to do with all these mechanical technologies and like kind of the transhumanism stuff. In a way, it gets very tricky though. I just explored this a bunch in some recent videos if you're curious to learn more about the redemption of Armon, which I still do not really understand myself. But I'm a big fan of this idea that Lucifer is, we have to make friends with kind of the Luciferic imagination and pharmacon and art and all this, the Venusian, etc. Yeah, so that's good, but sadly we still live in schizo times, and by that I mean schizo in the etymological sense has to do with split. We don't have a harmonious relationship with Lucifer and Armon. We have disharmony, non-eurythmic, because eurythmy is musical harmoniousness. It's like well ordered things that are in harmonious relationship, and that's kind of the more etymological prior to Steiner's eurythmy, meaning, yeah, and we still live in these times where Sophia is in exile and Lucifer is demonized. But and that is no good. But I think it is conversations like all of these and such that I think are moving the ball forward or something of the sort. And much love again to Luke, and I love the video. Thank you, Luke, for engaging with the conversation, and I hope you found my extensive ramblings here about my comments and thinkings interesting. And in all humility, thank you again, and I wish you all a wonderful day. Watch out for mind control.